Hello everyone. So we're going to talk today about the DCS Vivaldi Apex DAC with the master clock. Now we've been talking about DCS for a number of videos, and of course part of it is because we just recently became a dealer. This particular Vivaldi Apex does not belong to us. It belongs to a client of ours, and he is self-described as a person with too many toys and an addict and needs desperate help. Shout out to Randy. Anyway, he's selling this because, truthfully, he does have a lot of toys, and he just bought something very recently and decided he's going to try and pare it down a little bit. So let me tell you a little bit about the Vivaldi in general, and then this one in particular. Up until very recently, the Vivaldi Apex was the top of the line, and you have the option of buying a transport, an upsampler, the master clock, and so on. In this particular case, he has the master clock and the Vivaldi Apex DAC. Now, these were, or are, I should say, originally bought as Apex. So it's not an upgraded version. You certainly can buy a Vivaldi and then send it back to the factory for the Apex upgrade, but this was bought about roughly a year and a half ago as the latest and greatest version. Comes with full boxes, manuals, remote control. Actually, Mike, if you don't mind, if you can find me the remote control, it should be in the big room. And while I'm still talking about this, I want to show you this remote control. Anyway, the normal selling price of the Vivaldi with the Vivaldi Apex DAC with the master clock is $72,900 US or 94.5 Canadian. We're selling this set for 44,000 US or 60,000 Canadian. So it's a hell of a bargain, especially given the fact that it's current, it's the latest version, and it's in great condition. I always hesitate to call anything mint, just simply because somebody will always see, well, I see a little thing here and there. So I'm just going to say very, very, very good condition, basically complete. And oh, Mike's got a remote, so let me just show you the remote. This is the remote control. I don't know if you can see this. I'm just going to give you an idea of how big. See my shoe size? My shoe size is 9. This is, I want to say, a 10. This is a remote control from Macintosh as a comparison, right? It's like, just in case you didn't feel adequate, this is the remote you need to have. But I'll talk about the remote in a bit. All right. So anyway, yeah, this Vivaldi Apex DAC with the master clock is, as a setup, complete for sale. So if after this video you're interested, reach out info@audioexcellence.ca and I'll go over some questions you may have. All right, so the system that I set it up in, I use the Lumen U2 as a streamer. In the future, we will use the new U2X, which just came out. It's Lumen's top-of-the-line streamer. We just received it. I haven't had a chance to open it yet, but we will use that in the future. I use the Dan D'Agostino Momentum C2 preamplifier, the Wilson active crossover, because we have the, anyway, I'll talk about that in a moment, the relentless D'Agostino 800 monoblocks to drive the Wilson Chronosonic towers, and the Macintosh MC 1.25 kilowatt monoblocks to drive the subsonic Wilson bass towers. And all the cables were Shunyata Sigma X2 and Nordos Valhalla. So what does it sound like? Now keep in mind, this is all with certain past experience all built together. So for example, in the previous videos, we talked about the Rossini, we talked about the Bartok, we talked about the Masterwork clock, we talked about how DCS compares to the roughly equivalent MSB reference and so on. So this is the latest of that comparison, if you will, or exploration. The very first word that came to my mind when I started listening was authentic. And I've always hesitated to use this word because what is authenticity? I mean, I wasn't there in the recording process. I don't know how they mastered it. I don't know how much EQ they applied. I have no idea. But if I were to play recordings that I'm familiar with, in other words, I've played it long time. And I know the little nuances and the little details and what is expected and so on. Somehow it just sounds right. It just sounds real. And on recordings that are really good, it's spookily real. It's scary how real it can be. I'll get into those details in a moment. But yeah, so the first word that came to my mind was authentic. And then the second word is scale. And this word, I have to give credit to one of my clients, Andre. Shout out to Andre if you're watching this. He and I have been talking about different systems and big systems and the difference between certain speakers versus other speakers. And he used the word scale. And I thought, now that is a very appropriate word to describe the Vivaldi. It has scale. Scale in terms of the size of the soundstage, the depth, the images, the rightness of the proportion. So that's another one. And then believability. Those are three words that I would use to sort of describe the sound that I heard. And then I put down here, with great recordings, this is simply the best sound I've ever heard through my big system. So I just described the big system. So let's go into some details. At first in my notes, I separated or segregated all the different findings like I normally do, you know, soundstage, bass, imaging, detail, tone, and all that kind of stuff. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk in general first and then give you some of the recordings that I used as examples. As I mentioned earlier, it just sounds authentic. Scale. On some of these recordings, you find yourself at the venue. You are there with the musicians. You are there listening to the recording as it was done at that time. And if the recording captured the magic of that performance, you will get incredible goosebumps. There are times that you will get tears in your eyes, at least I did, and in some cases both. It's hypnotic in so many ways. Cuts where I thought I would just listen to the one cut, I ended up listening to the entire album. It's hypnotic, it's beguiling. I'll talk obviously about the pros and then I'll talk about some of the cons as well. I'm not here to tell you that it's perfect, but when I played recordings I know, recordings that I care about, recordings that are very good, it really was some of the very best I've ever experienced through my big system. So here I'm going to give you a couple examples. Bob Marley, The Whalers, live at the Lyceum. This one particular cut, the No Woman, No Cry, it's a 7-minute cut. And for the first, I can't remember, it was 6 or 8 bars. The band starts playing, you start hearing the Hammond B3 in the back, and it's not just in the back, it's there, it's present, it's real. It's as good as I've ever heard a Hammond sound. How the engineer captured this presence is scary. It's so good. And the speakers are right in front of me, left and right, and the sound is right there. I'm there on the stage. And then you can hear the audience start singing the words to this song, even though the band hasn't started yet. The music has just started, and then the audience starts singing. And it also evokes this ambience. It brings you back to when this was done, and you could almost close your eyes and smell the fresh aroma of whatever it is that they were imbibing at that time. People were just completely relaxed, having a great time at this incredible performance. And then he starts singing, and within seconds you hear feedback and it's captured. Now, I've heard the feedback. I swear to you, I've heard the feedback before, and yet I never noticed it. And then suddenly on the system, I go, what's that? Now, keep in mind, I'm already lost in the music. This is at least 2 minutes into the song, and then he starts singing, and I'm already lost, and then suddenly I hear the feedback. For the first time, I was actually cognizant of that feedback. And then within 2 seconds, it's gone. And then further later on in the song, it comes back. This time it's much louder. And again, I've heard this song multiple times. It never, ever occurred to me before until this time around. Don't know why. And it's not like a subtle little buzz. It was obvious. Um, the drums were so tactile, so punchy. I'm not talking about deep bass. I'm talking about the tactile immediacy of the drums. It was just like I'm going to keep saying, I was there. And that's the magic of a really good experience. When everything is right, you're transported to a different time. And in this case, the magic was indeed captured really, really well. So that's an example. Another example would be audiophiles. We love to talk about things like dynamics and slam and leading edge and detail and so on. I know I joke a lot about Morrison and the fact that I ban what's that cut that I ban?
Cashmere.
Cashmere. But Morrison has done a lot of great cuts, and Carmen is one of those great demo cuts that we haven't played it so much that I want to ban it yet. It starts off with a shrieking loud, I think he's sliding the guitar, yeah, and then it starts. This guy is a guitar virtuoso. I don't know, how old is he? What do you think, Mike?
25, I think.
My
Maybe
gosh,
even.
he's like Van Halen reborn. Is insane. Except he doesn't play. I don't think he plays electric, but on this acoustic guitar, it's insane what he can do with the guitar. Um, and it's if you've never heard it, this is Carmen completely reinterpreted. And it's so much fun. There's fire, there's intensity, there's power, there's magic, and then there's slight softness, and then it's off to the races again. If you want to hear detail and leading edge and speed and dynamics and so on, that's a great cut to try. And then you want to hear something that is pure. One of the best piano cuts I can recommend to you is Jean Batist on the cut Chopinesque. I've told the story before, but I didn't know who Jean Batist was until one day on Rune Radio it came out, and I was listening in the background. I thought, my God, what is that? Ran into the room and listened to it, and I thought, this is unbelievable. It's just a guy playing the piano, but it's so good, so good. And as I'm listening, I kept thinking, it sounds like he's playing on a Steinway. Didn't know anything about this guy. Forgot all about it. Years later, I was watching something on TV, and I think it was a concert, and he was playing, and I noticed on the piano it says Steinway. But lots of people play Steinway. What's the big deal? So I thought I'd Google this guy, and sure enough, he's a Steinway ambassador. The tone of the piano is so good. You've got to hear it. There's such a richness. There's such an authenticity. Coming back to that word again, the DCS does an amazing job of reproducing this realness, this accuracy. Then all of this really wouldn't matter if at the end of the day all you had was audiophile stuff and no musicality. In other words, it doesn't turn you on. At the end of the day, does it make music? And so I'm going to give you some musical examples that show that it does. Leopto Stokowski's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2 in C sharp minor. It's a piece of music I've listened to ever since I was a kid. My father was a big fan of this piece of music, and so I've heard this hundreds of times easily. And one of the things I always worry about is that if I play a piece of music too much, maybe I'll get sick of it. Thankfully, that's not happened with this piece of music. When I play it on the Vivaldi, it's like hearing all over again. Except back then, I was listening to it through my father's Volvo with the windows all up because it's in Singapore. It's really, really hot and humid, and he's driving us around with his Volvo air conditioning all cranked up, and he and my mom are smoking up a chain. So we're breathing in all this smoke, and we're listening to this piece of music through the Volvo. Well, it's like that all over again, except this time I'm hearing it with fidelity. with the details that I just never heard before. Before, I just heard the music. Now I hear the music and I feel the emotions of the piece of music. For example, towards the end, the last three bars, when the orchestra goes into full fortissimo, this power, this jubilance of the music is just awe-inspiring. Um, Itzhak Perlman uh, playing Jules Massenet's Thai Meditation from the album A la carte with the Abbey Road Ensemble with Lawrence Foster conducting. If you can't find this album, I've given you all the hints. It's, again, one of my favorite pieces of music, and Itzhak Perlman does a masterful job. The album is not a great recording. It's not a bad recording, it's just not great. It's lacking a little bit of air, lacking a bit of clarity. Um, um, Bass is a little bit muffled, but despite all of that, the performance is so good that I get goosebumps when I hear it. Again, despite the fact that it's not a great recording. And I want to point out that is something that the Vivaldi does really, really well. Even with average recordings, if there's magic, the magic comes through. I came in one morning and through the magic of Rune Radio, it was playing Ella Fitzgerald mono albums, and then it went to Billie Holiday mono albums. So I'm sitting there listening to all these different albums recorded back in the 40s and 50s, I guess. It was all mono, and it didn't matter. It was still so beautiful. Um, Listening to Billie Holiday and Strange Fruit. I mean, if you know the background behind the song and why she sang it, it's just fantastic. I don't have the words for it. Ray Brown, one of the great albums of all time, Live at the Loa. So Ray was a co-owner of the Loa, and it's a relatively small club. Microphones are turned on, and Ray Brown starts with his double bass, and then you have Gene Harris playing the piano, doing this bluesy riff, and then Jeff Hamilton backing up with the drums. And a few seconds into this cut, the real blues, the phone rings, and there's a little bit of uncertainty. There's a little bit of weirdness among the audience, and then suddenly somebody laughs, and then everybody laughs, right? So it always happens. It's somebody breaks the ice, and then all the tension goes. And then the band starts going, the trio starts going. Some of the finest, most rollicking, beautiful piece of music ever recorded, and that magic is captured. And the sound is reproduced so incredibly well through I like to call my He-Man rig. This is just one of those times where I say to myself, I'm glad I had the funds to buy this system. Well, the Vivaldi has done the best job I've ever heard through my system. So let me just do a summary real quick. I know it's hard. I've seen some comments when we did the previous video on the Rossini and the Bartok, and a bunch of people were obviously offended that it could cost so much money and so on, and I get it. I really do. I didn't come from money, so I do know the value of a dollar. I'm not talking to people, in this case, like you, in that I would not be able to justify, if you cannot afford something, why you should buy something. It's just something that you have to work on your own. What I'm saying is that if you can, or if you're just generally interested in how good something is, I can honestly say that the Vivaldi is the very best DAC I've heard in my system. I'm not saying there's nothing better. So far, in my system, it is the best balanced DAC in terms of combining authenticity, accuracy, detail, all the audiophile buzzwords, along with the ability to extract musicality that I've heard. It's that good. Now, does it compare with the MSB Select? Well, I think that in those ways, it's better than the MSB Select. But I hasten to also say, the MSB Select at this point is over 10 years old, has been discontinued. Waiting to hear the Cascade to see what that sounds like, because that would be more of a fair comparison. But considering that this is the latest version from DCS, it stands to reason that it should be better. The fact that the MSB is even in this comparison at all is worthy to talk about, that the MSB is superb, but it lacks some of that clarity. It lacks some of the detail. It lacks some of the immediacy and the impact and the speed. But what it does have is the ability to make average and poor recordings sound listenable. Um, where where the DCS will not hide the fact that it's a bad recording, it certainly doesn't highlight and make it worse. The MSB will make it sound a little bit more listenable. So for some people, that will be the deciding factor. Um, so the question is, does it have soul? And I mentioned, in my opinion, absolutely, yes, it does. It has soul because it can give me that musicality that some very, very transparent DAGs don't give me. It can bring me to tears that some very accurate DAGs don't do. I was debating whether or not to give this analogy about cars, because some people get triggered when I talk about cars and go, why don't you do a car review instead of an audio review? Anyway, um, back in 2012, McLaren came out with their first consumer car that they hadn't made for a very long time, and this was their first. And the difference was that this was going to be something that they would make at a price that they could sell in larger quantities than the previous models. And they called it the MP12-4C. So I will come back to the name, um, but it ostensibly stands for McLaren Project 12, meaning 2012, or it's been 12 years since the last model, dash 4C. Can't remember what 4 stands for. C apparently means carbon. Um, and on paper, this car was apparently the very best car you could buy in comparison with anything from Ferrari or Lamborghini and so on, anywhere near its price. It had higher horsepower, it had better braking, it had better aerodynamics, it was more advanced. The whole tub was made of carbon fiber. I mean, you can go on and on and on. Every important or unimportant spec, this car had it over the competition. At the time, the Ferrari, I think, equivalent was the 488. Um, well, what's interesting is that then Jeremy Clarkson did a review of the McLaren, and he essentially said this car lacked fun. And he said, it's like talking to the engineers at McLaren and saying it lacks soul, it lacks fun. And you can see the McLaren engineers computing, going, fun. How do we engineer that into the car? What kind of programming can we do with it? And that's in some cases with audio stuff, that's what happens. For a few minutes, you sit there and you are amazed at how it can do all the stereo spectacular stuff, especially if it's a great recording. Oh, wow, sound stages beyond the speakers. Oh, wow, bass. Oh, wow, depth. And then, you play something that's musically important, significant, and you go, oh, it's a bad recording. And then you walk away. Not with the Vivaldi. The Vivaldi is able to combine, at least for me, my right brain and my left brain, so that as a whole being, I'm very satisfied. It is truly that good. And just to put a fine point on the McLaren, by the way, I don't agree. I think the McLaren is actually a lot of fun to drive. It may not necessarily be as exotic as a Ferrari. I haven't driven the 488, so I don't know. But the McLaren is a phenomenal car. I've driven it. It's a phenomenal car. The fact that it somebody says it's not doesn't mean it is. Anyway, I don't know why I detoured into that. Last thing about the DCS. What are the cons? Well, setup could be a bit of a pain. It's not intuitive in that sense. You got to read the manual. You got to figure out what the different modes are, the different filters do, and so on and so on. It's not intuitive. On the faceplate, there's no enter button. The enter button, I think, is the power button, which is not intuitive. Like, why would you press the power button for the enter? Because you think that if you press the power, it would just shut off. So you've just found the location you want, you found the setting you want, and then you go press the off button or the power button. Doesn't make a lot of sense. In some companies, they'll use the volume control, could be the push button for enter, or maybe just have a button that says enter. But here's the other thing. See this? This big, huge remote with all this real estate. There is no enter button either. The volume control, this big, huge thing, does not, you can't press it in for an enter. There's no cursor buttons for left, right, up, down. For such a big remote, it's just wasted space almost. I could think of having a remote control volume, which is like a, what do you call those jog shuttle volume controls? That you can push up or push down, go left and right, and then press and enter. For something this big, it's a shame that it is not more multi-purpose and useful. The one thing you can use this for, if you are in Ontario and you have a carry, what they call it, hidden and carry license, this could be a lethal weapon. If you're in New York, you could use this as a lethal weapon. I guess in Texas, you don't have to hide this. You just carry this in your holster. This is how dangerous this could be. I'm impressed. This is one crazy big MF remote control.
It's dwarfing your head.
And nobody said I had a small head. Anyway, thanks for watching this crazy rambling video. Again, reminder, doesn't belong to us. So if you buy it or not buy it, it doesn't directly affect us. But I will say that if you are in the market for a top DAC, one that is current, but one that has been depreciated because it's been used in mint condition in this case, or very, very, very good condition, this is one heck of a buy. Again, we're selling it for 44,000 US or 60,000 Canadian. Email me if you want more information, info@audioexcellence.ca. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.